Good morning, everyone. Thanks for fighting the cold weather and showing up this morning. And the next hour, we are going to show you quite a lot of numbers and something quite exciting that Indrek and his colleagues have been working on for close to 3 years. A platform and a tool that will give a very interesting numerical-based approach into VOD, festival success, and hopefully financing correlations as well. So we're going to show you a lot of data, a lot of numbers. There is the famous saying that in God we trust and everyone else bring data. Nothing could be more true at this particular moment. We know that from the European Audiovisual Observatory, and the latest official statistics are out from 2023 and 2024. And the numbers, of course, if you've seen the screen article, are quite brutal. There were 2,514 feature-length films and documentaries produced in Europe. Only 41 of them got more than 1 million admissions globally. And if you start calculating the percentage, that is exactly a problem. And I think there is many factors that play to that. But clearly, producing more content is enough. Thinking how we produce it more efficiently, with what type of resources and with what type of outcomes. I think if you are a financier, a producer, a National Film Institute, a platform, etc., these are the questions what you have to ask. We try to make this session as interactive as possible, ask a lot of questions, especially when it comes to the part of FIDA. Hopefully we'll be able to get some answers to you as well. We'll have a lot of reports to show you. There will be QR codes for you to grab our reports. Let's get started. A lot of you know what CresCine is. Just to do a little bit of a refresh, CresCine is a Horizon Europe funded project. This is a very unique consortium for more than 20 organizations, both in the industry side as well as in the academia. And the role in the almost past 3 years has been to get market insights into key industry aspects that involves audiences, financing, innovation, of course, AI, what else, sustainability, distribution, exhibition skills, and all kinds of new tech, including blockchain. How do we share these briefings? These are industry best grade briefings and insights. We speak at major events, like here in Tallinn, and Berlin, and elsewhere. We publish regular reports. There is a report or a dossier on a certain type of a subject matter almost every month. Our flagship publication is the State of European Film. This is our annual publications. There's 2 editions of that out. And the last one, with specific recommendations, especially for small markets, is going to come out in late January. And we will have a grand finale as well, which we'll talk a little bit later. Crunching the numbers, we've already reached more than 45,000 professionals across Europe. There is almost 5,500 subscribers to our monthly newsletter. Go to crescine.eu, sign up. We're publishing it also on LinkedIn to get the fresh data on the markets. We've done more than 60 events, 10 industry-focused reports, which are all free. And as I said, the State of European Film, there's 2 editions out and the last one is coming as well. And if you look back into this sort of 33 months, almost 33 months journey, we've done a lot of work. So we looked at audiences, producers, skills, distributors, alternative cinema venues, AI, digital marketing, reception, discoverability, selection catalogs, and then et cetera, and et cetera, and et cetera. So we've been awfully busy in order to get these insights to you and start understanding how small film industries, especially in Europe, are doing. What are we going to focus on today? We'll look at the 4 key themes today. What is the overall state of play? What are the key findings from latest reports? We're going to shuffle through 4 of our latest reports that have been out since August. Then I'll hand over to Indrek, who is going to show you what data can bring to decision makers such as you. Plus, there is one more thing. How is the European film industry doing? We are in a strange interim period where some strategic avenues have finished, but the new ones are not yet in place. EU, which is the major financier for most of our production, whether in film, TV, or even interactive, is right now negotiating its next fiscal year budget. Why this is very important and why your voice is important in that particular discussion is that fiscal decision will be made for next 7 years. 7 years is awfully lot amount of time, if you understand what even has happened in the past 3. So articulating your needs, understanding what are your requirements, how is your particular market or co-producers covered, this is the right moment to put in your contributions. Talk to your national stakeholders, talk to your film institutions, talk to your festivals, your colleagues internationally. This is the moment to have your say. These decisions will be made in the next few months and will collectively influence our work and the environment for a long time to come. We've also seen that the distribution landscape is becoming extremely complex. It is not enough to get your film produced. The key question remains, how do you get it distributed? Sales agents are becoming more wary of picking up titles. MGs are clearly dropping, both from a numerical perspective, as well as colloquial conversation throughout the markets. And the competition is shifting. So if the competition was between theatrical and VOD a few years back, now it's VOD versus YouTube. These are very hard numbers. Latest stats are showing that YouTube gets around 2.8 billion monthly active customers. In a few months ago, they've also launched AI-based localization. I don't know if you paid attention, but most of the content in YouTube now can be automatically transcribed to other languages, broadening that competitive edge as well. It's still quite clunky, but you see where the future is heading. The difference between YouTube and Netflix is already 10x. Publicly, Netflix is around 310 million subscribers, YouTube 2.8 billion. So we really have to start kind of figuring out how do we strategically position us against a kind of a free that is available on every phone, every TV, and etc. By the way, smart TVs is the platform where YouTube is seeing the highest growth. We also see quite prominent content owners, whether it's ZDF, Channel 4, and others, starting to release full episodes of their high production value content in YouTube in order to get audience traction and pull them back into their ecosystems. So these types of models are shifting very fast. That also leads to the other issue of our ecosystem competition is going from competition between content of just getting an audience. An average American spends around 13 hours with media and technology. That's broadly around 7 hours with video. So the question again, and as we've articulated before, how do we grab someone out of that 7 hours of social media, YouTube videos, and etc. into our own content, whichever platform that is. What is really becoming also quite strategic and problematic is that there is a massive race going on in terms of AI. There hasn't been a single major government in the last 6 months who hasn't announced a major AI funding strategy. The difference between investments broadly into AI between Silicon Valley and Europe are 4x. If Europe announced its Act on AI strategy, that's broadly €1 million. Silicon Valley has already invested 4.5 billion euros into the AI development. Currently, what we see in EU strategies is that content creation and film is not covered in strategic EU AI plan. When for our competitors or friends overseas, content is something that the benefits of AI are being articulated, we're still negotiating on that. This is going to be a disadvantage, and we need to form a strategy on this. Streamers have already issued AI guidelines. How many of you have seen the Netflix AI guideline? Go and Google Netflix AI guidelines. They are pretty good. I think that they will be some sort of a standard. If a major streamer says, yes, we have guidelines, then that means they will use it to a great degree. In your national ecosystem, on your guilds, on your industry organizations, have you started to figure out the guideline in order to operate in this environment? Going to be very, very essential. AI in film versus film in AI. Discoverability is getting more complex. AI interfaces, whether that's ChatGPT, Comet, Perplexity, Claude, and everything else that Google puts out, are becoming the first avenue for people interacting with the internet, aka the information out there. If we already had issues in getting our film content seen in platforms, now most of the search for film is going to happen through AI interfaces. Have you negotiated with these partners to have your catalogs represented? We don't have time to go in here, but the whole search of content is going to be different. You're not searching anymore for a particular title or a synopsis. You're searching for an emotion, a character, a certain moment in time. What that would require for you to get your film discoverable. Both Netflix, Google, and some others have already released the AI search. There's a lot of interesting work done, mostly in media, but we have to take notice on discoverability. We don't need to talk a lot of things about US tariffs. Are European films going to be taxed or not? It remains a mystery. But certainly the general feeling is quite uneasy. We see a certain, I would say, an emotional and a practical cooling between North America and Europe. And of course, the big question that remains out of there, will global box office and success remain elusive as it was in 2023, 2024? We don't have the latest stats, but hopefully it will be positive. All of these factors are contributing to the challenges we have to address. What have our recent reports found out? In the last 3 months, we put out close to 6 reports. 4 of them are here. We've looked at some challenges and drivers for distribution and exhibition. We've released a report of effective marketing strategies for films, especially for small territories. Indrek and his colleagues have put out a great blockchain report. We looked into Arthouse cinemas, and in the upcoming days, there will be quite a lot of talk about our green toolbox. This is really interesting work that has been done over 2 years, comparing different green production strategies, calculators, etc., trying to make it easy for independent producers. All of these are available on our website, so go get them. So what do we see for small European films? Theatrical exclusivity still remains pretty crucial. So if you have a chance of get to theatrical, push for theatrical. Although we see monopolies of distribution and exhibition taking place in most of small European territories, whether it's Estonia, Croatia, Scandinavia, etc., and we all know it makes life quite tough for us, theatrical window still is a big revenue item, especially as we understand that VODs are buying less. The hope that Netflix will come and fill up the gap for your production, quite unlikely. Movie, which used to be a sort of a major Arthouse distributor, they are also moving into a vertically integrated model where they have their own sales agent, they have their own slate. So it's very hard to sort of grab any decent revenue from VOD. So push for theatrical. Definitely flexible strategies locally. Customization of release windows, absolute priority. Day-to-day releases, especially small markets, should be used very cautiously because in a smaller market, it can eat into your box office. And of course, it's very important to think about theatrical infrastructure because that fuels domestic success. This particular report looked into the case of Lithuania, and one of our striking finds was that it's not cinemas in major cities, but it's usually community cinemas, cinemas outside in rural areas that, especially for domestic productions, are driving your box office. So it's really great to aim for a community-based exhibition, and that is sort of the backbone of what your strategy is. And of course, audience habits, these are presenting quite a lot of challenges. You have to maintain them, create momentum with them. You have to talk to them actively in community building in order to get them on board. Of course, festival presence is essential. If you're selected into an international film festival, it's purely a marketing avenue that primarily fuels your international prospects. Co-productions remain relevant for capitalization, and no surprise, animation and family genres that can be adaptable, including with genre films, we see statistically are performing really best. So if you go to CresCine website, our colleagues have built interactive dashboards that show you the box office correlations for genres and productions. So you'll be able to see what these dynamics are. Of course, VOD and SVOD are important because that's the first place to go. Being selected for a platform is halfway to success. When negotiating with a VOD player, don't negotiate just for acquisition, negotiate for visibility. The key is to get a front screen or a second screen presentation to ensure visibility, because you might be on that platform, but if you don't have a P&A deal with them, it's very hard to get people to watch your stuff. And of course, no surprise, training, especially in all kinds of new tech innovation, is essential because we need to draw all these things together. What works in marketing? Digital and data-driven. If you have a chance of getting a great agency, someone who understands data, metrics, experiments, and so forth, that is really a lifeline. Small budgets with great experiments, understanding what converts in audience is very essential. PR is great, but you would need to start almost on a micro level, testing out different types of content releases to get attention. We spoke about adaptability and community. It's mostly community audiences that are forming the core of your audiences. And obviously, especially when you negotiate with your stakeholders, it's not only box office that defines success. It's a social topic, it's a contribution to a community. We see that non-traditional success metrics are contributing to long tail. Films coming back into theatrical, especially through the community and other success metrics. And as I said before, it's alternative cinemas where most of their revenue lies from. Community places, cultural centers, small avenues, and etc., because primarily they have their own audience. Audience is your major currency. When it comes to cinema, these need to be run less than cinemas, but also hybrid venues. There needs to be different types of sectorial partnerships, whether that's government, financial institutions, slate commissioning, and etc. And obviously location and infrastructure is absolutely premium. These things might not sound new, but as the customer has so much choice, you need to maintain a premium infrastructure. Audience selections are more and more made based on a whole experience rather than seeing a film. So how do you maintain an infrastructure that drives that experience rather than just screening content is something that needs to look on. And of course, these need to be combined with diverse programming, special events, filmmaker attendance, and so forth and so forth. Finally, before we get to Indrek, don't worry, this thing is here to stay. About a month ago, I had a chance to do a briefing for 22 European fund directors. And I asked them how many of them have an AI strategy in place or a guideline in place. How many you think said yes? So that's 3, 5. Kristen wins. Out of 22, 4 had a strategy. And this is a problem, where a broadcaster, a streamer, a studio has a very clear plan. Then having no plan, as we would not be accepting generative content, is better than having no plan at all. What is very essential to understand is that EU is not going to solve that problem. It's not going to be Brussels or whatever the coordinating agency will be in the future. They will not develop a guideline. They are actively looking for best practices from the market to build perhaps a certain type of standard. There has been a recent call to get input from stakeholders, but that standard will not come from Brussels. Plus, on a longer term, there are heavy political debates, which won't go here today, whether the AI Act will be paused, whether it will be transformed, or anything else. It is your responsibility or your community's responsibility to come up with a strategy, guideline, or approach, and then communicate it to your stakeholders. These kinds of things, I've spoken 2 days in an industry AI lab, especially in the legal aspects. Compliance to AI guidelines will be as essential as your talent release forms. A sales agent, a distributor won't pick up your content if you haven't basically gone through a guideline and ensured compliance for your E&O. It's not only fully generative work that will go into productions. It could be VFX, assisted work on your budgets. It could be audience research, data-based approaches, and etc. These things need to go through a compliance checklist. And you need to agree amongst yourself in your community what those guidelines are, including the documentation principles to ensure copyright for that particular work. From a Scandinavian experience, that especially for VFX and augmentation is coming very heavily into primetime TV and series. And of course, in order to manage your chain of title and clearance, it needs to be guideline compliant. If you don't have those guidelines, go for them. Look out for the tools. There's plenty of them. I'm sure there's many of these tool providers here as well. You all know them. Talk to them actively. Engage with them. We need to get out of a passive situation of saying that a certain platform doesn't give us X stats because they need your data. In order for them to be better, they need access to your data and vice versa. So it is a dialogue. Research time as co-production time needs to be scheduled. There are plenty of pilot programs, both from European vendors and American vendors, of putting their technologies to use. Low budget tasks you can test out on every day. We will be announcing very shortly a 1-year MBA program between Denmark, Estonia, and Benelux countries. Hopefully you are able to join us, and this is where we are doing exactly that. Define your goal, budgets, generation, VFX, and etc., and provide constructive feedback for everyone. These recommendations we received from interviewing several producers and going through pilots with that. But now we need to talk about money. Indrek, to you.
Hello, I'm a professor of media innovation here at Tallinn University, and I'm going to now tell you about the joint work that we have been doing as part of the CresCine project. The kind of partners of this, so to speak, work package have been Lusofoni University in Portugal, as well as Tyne Studios, that is a data analytics company located in 3 countries in Europe, Germany, Finland, and Austria. What have we been doing? In some sense, kind of the thread that went through Sten's talk was that we kind of have a problem in Europe, because one thing obviously is that European markets are so fragmented. And the second problem is that access to data is very different depending on the markets. There are the major, film analytics, data analytics, market analytics companies that are interested and work for the stakeholders in the largest markets. But when it comes to data about the smaller countries in Europe, it's mostly not available. And if there is something, then it's very difficult to cross-link and carry out analysis that link different release windows, compare different countries, etc. So there's no understanding how films are doing in terms of the life cycle across different release windows as well as different export markets. So why is that? The reasons are plenty. On the one hand, we don't have proper data standards that would enable to link different data sets. It is very difficult to carry out such analysis. And also, we are not even aware of where the data is very often. When you digitize processes, one externality that comes with that is data about this process. However, very often, the digitizers of these processes haven't realized that there could be extra value when it comes to the data they produce, and there's no kind of established ways how to hand over the data they have for analytics companies, how to clean and operationalize that data, etc. What we have been doing is realizing different things. There is a real problem of market transferability, understanding what is actually happening in European markets, and henceforth it's very difficult to kind of develop any kind of reasonable overarching exporting strategy across Europe and beyond. We need to look for two things: where the data is, negotiate with data owners, and figure out how to connect those. This is not always easy. The problem is that there's no state standards. What I mean by standards, one element there is identifiers. So we need to always create clever ways for interconnecting data sets and then carry out analysis. Some of the proposals that is not about analytics when it comes to policy-oriented work is to recommend to the European Commission how to get out of this situation, how to become aware of what data is actually existing in Europe when it comes to different stages of the value chains, how to actually enable the interconnecting of these different data sets. For this, we need to agree on the standards that everybody is using in Europe that is holding or operating with data. The aim is to achieve a much better transparency when it comes to European markets, and this would enable, provide the tools for them, for the producers, etc., distributors. They could develop much cleverer distributions across countries, release windows, etc. Now, what have we done? We have made a serious effort to get our hands around the data from different kinds of data owners who produce some kind of data about some stage of the value chain. As I already said, this means very often just identifying who may have the data. Like anecdotal stories is that, as all of us, we have smart TVs at home, and we realize that actually these telecoms operators are offering us nice overview of what films have been available on which television channel. You could choose the film that was on air like 4 days ago, and there's a nice portal, etc. How do they know that all these films have been available? Because there's one company in Europe that does this digitization of TV schedules of 8,000 channels in Europe. And we eventually realized what company is this, and we asked them nicely, and we made a deal. We got this 4 years of data over 8,000 TV channels. So now we have precise show times of all films across Europe, exactly when they've been shown on which channel. We could do this kind of TV distribution analytics. Or films are out there on torrents. We know piracy is bad, but it's still there. 50% of films watched online are watched over some pirating site. We know this, but actually we cannot shut down the pirating. At least we know how much has been pirated, yeah? So we can count this, and there's a company who does that. Or all the cinemas are having their websites available, how many of their seats have been booked for which films, on which screen, wherever in the world, yeah? These kind of seats, red or green, can be also counted, and then we know exactly what films have been shown in which cinemas, etc. So this can be collected as well. There are festivals, management programs that have all the awareness of which films have been part of which program. Sinando has the data of which sales agents have been watching some of the films in their system. We can analyze this as well if we would want to. We know exactly who's talking to whom. So again, we could analyze that as well. There's a lot of data available. We can carry out analytics to understand what influences the life cycles of films. We have been trying to negotiate. This has been hard. But now I'm going to tell you what did we get. So we have, kind of basic data about all European films. Data we have been getting from TMDB. Why TMDB and not, let's say, IMDb? Because in some sense, we cannot really trust these US-based proprietary platforms that data is for the money, etc. But we are trying to build kind of long-term open source system. So henceforth, TMDB. Wikidata is a very nice platform that is growing. Wikidata is very important in the long term, is that they are including these identifiers that I already mentioned that enable to connect all the different kind of other data sets. And if Wikidata kind of starts growing and different data owners provide more data there, then this could be becoming one of the kind of central bone of any data analytics systems when it comes to cultural markets. Of course, we have been getting the Lumiere database, also some of the basic data about films produced in Europe. Then we are interested, as Sten was already mentioning, festivals are important marketing venues. So we've been getting all the data from Sinando, our institutional partner, then also some data, again, from Wikidata. And we have been self-collecting a lot of data from the internet about festival programs and festival awards. We have gotten cinema admissions from Lumiere specifically, box office data from Lumiere Pro. Then what is really quite important and with a lot of potential, we bought data from a company called International Showtimes. They are not the only company providing this data, but we got it from them when it comes to cinema showtimes. So exactly when a film was shown in which cinema. If we get this data about cinema showtimes, when we relate this to cinema admissions and box office, we can really start carrying out analytics of how the admissions of the box office numbers were really built. Where are they coming from? Which time slot, in which cinema, smaller cinema, bigger cinema, etc. VOD presence we got from Asherio. I'm sure many of you know this company all over the world. As I already mentioned, there's this company called Mediapress TV from which we got TV showtimes data. What we would have liked to get is how this pirating data is being collected. There's a company called Muso, maybe some of you know, in the UK that does that. This data is very expensive because everybody is interested in what is the real interest of people out there to consume films. Not influenced by marketing, or maybe to an extent by marketing, but not like the structure on the both sides of VOD services, etc., but just kind of word to mouth, what people are interested in to consume. And this data henceforth has a lot of value. We didn't manage to work enough on getting public funding data. We got it for some countries, and maybe we will use that later, but right now we are not using it. So how the film life cycles are depending on how much public funding they have been getting at what points. Then what we did not get at this point is reception text. So all the reviews of various kinds on platforms such as Rotten Tomatoes and Letterboxd. We tried to ask several times, but they are not giving out this data because they understand exactly the value of it. Because for all kinds of LLMs want to train on this data and develop their own services. So right now we didn't get there, but perhaps in the future. We also have a lot of data about film genres, but we are also interested in film topics or themes of films, and what kind of social realities the films are about. This could be analyzed if you want to understand the public value in terms of thematic diversity of films. We probably will do it at some future point when we use LLMs probably to analyze at least film synopsis, and then we understand better what's in the films and can carry out this analysis. So how did we do this? We are building our database on a platform called Databricks, an increasingly widely used, very flexible system for doing data analytics. And we are publishing, and how we put out this data. So because we got some of the data from private partners, there are limits when it comes to how we can use this data. We cannot publish anything on single films. Yeah. So everything we will publish need to be aggregated to some extent. Or at least we cannot give the names out of what film. So this is why we are publishing mostly as dashboards on the internet. And when we publish the dashboard, we publish there the little aggregated data sets with the data presented. The dashboard presentation mode is important because up until now, when you receive any analytics about film markets, you get it in the form of reports. Yeah, some European Audiovisual Observatory, etc., that are doing nice work. It's always kind of a report, which means that two things. It's not some analysts have already made a decision what matters when it comes to this particular data set, what perspective is most important. But actually, of such data, you could probably answer much more specific questions. So what is of interest when you're a producer, distributor, or whatever of a specific kind? This is why interactive dashboards are a better mode of data presentation, because everybody can dig in and try to answer exactly the questions they are interested in. We hope that this mode of presenting data and analytic results would motivate other public service data analytics institutions, such as the Audiovisual Observatory in Europe, to also start using this mode, because we see that there's value in there. Okay, so as I already mentioned, we have been generating dashboards. There's more on the way. When it comes to more on the way, then one of them will be a simulation engine. That analysis simulation engine, meaning that basically answering the questions are based on the past trends. If you have a film of a certain kind in your hands, then what is the probability that how will this perform in specific export markets? The simulation engine right now only works for the theatrical window, but we have proof that it works with 80% certainty, which is actually quite high. So this will be coming soonish as well. But let me now get out of my slides and show you some of these dashboards, how they look. Let me start with the more specific ones. Sorry, they have this tendency to close themselves, these files. This is one of the things that actually an older dashboard was ready already almost a year ago. There is a kind of more newer version of it also, but because it has currently, this very moment, it has some flaws in it for specific reasons. So I'm showing you the older version, but it actually is pretty indicative as well. So here, this dashboard enables us to analyze how the films are traveling between different release windows, and we can choose between countries of where the films have been produced, as well as the kind of export markets here. So let's say Denmark. It's slow right now here, and we can get Germany. Based on the relationship of these two countries, we can analyze how films have been traveling. We can choose numerical data on one side, and then we can choose specific journeys and see what characterizes these journeys, how many, how much, etc. And then the whole idea of these dashboards is that there's a lot of data in there, so it takes a little while to kind of get your head around it. What are the opportunities here? What could I analyze? And that's the pleasure of it, that you start realizing gradually what you're interested in, what could be asked, etc. And with these dashboards, you can really study different kinds of things here. So that's rather basic things based on the observatory data. Again, what kind of films have been produced in Europe. You can do the kind of more fine filtering up there. You have these menus, and then, but we also can just click around on these dashboards themselves and look into what we are interested in. Let's say medium budget films coming from European Union small countries, or medium budget films from European Big Five, etc. So how much of what kind of films have been produced here? We can filter them by year. We can see what the relationships are between different countries, so production countries, admission countries, etc. Another dashboard is about theatrical demand. There are more things coming. I mentioned that we have cinema showtimes. This we have not, until this moment, integrated well into these dashboards, but in the next couple of months, this will be coming as well. Another interactive dashboard here, for instance, we can look into how the international movies, non-European, are being distributed in what are the results in Europe. There's a lot of filtering possibilities here, and one can dig in and really understand what's going on, how much of something from which country group have been distributed, and what are the box office numbers in different exporting markets and exporting markets as groups. Okay, another one is the VOD dashboards. That's one of the more interesting and more unique things right now here. So here we can analyze, we have market VOD availability data on a monthly basis for 4 years. We really understand how the situation has been changing every month. This enables us to carry out analytics, how films from different country groups or from specific countries. Let's just take from Estonia here. How they, how much more time it takes to release certain exporting markets, or how many platforms they are arriving in how many months, etc. We can also dig in, Estonian market, as we can already, there's evidence that Estonian films are not reaching well those big international platforms. We can look into, Amazon Prime, etc. What is the tendency when it comes to that specific markets? And then we can go on filtering, looking at any of these relationships. So yeah, these are the dashboards we have been currently producing, but more are on the way, especially looking into as I mentioned, we have data about cinema showtimes, TV presence, also festivals. Okay, so let's go back to my slides. I showed you what has been becoming possible, what have we been doing, and so what kind of questions we will be focusing kind of next. One of the interesting things that I already mentioned are the relationships between admissions, showtimes, and box office. To understand geographically where films have been shown, what kind of cinemas, what times, what slots, etc. This enables us to really understand how the admissions and box office numbers are coming together. We have been talking a lot about how cinematic window has been getting shorter and shorter. We kind of existing analysis shows already that maybe it's kind of unjustified. Because in Estonian case, we looked into Estonian data when it comes to relationship between showtimes and admissions, and it looks like there is relatively more demand for, let's say, domestic films. Still, actually, the cinemas give less time for domestic films for whatever reason. So we can start highlighting all these weird relationships in the markets, and we see that there's a lot of potential there. We have a lot of data about festivals to understand the relationships between films being shown in festivals in certain regions. How does this affect relative success in theatrical window, presence on VOD portals in that region, on TV channels eventually in that region as well. So there's a lot of work to do when it comes to these relationships. And predictive analytics. We have been working on the theatrical window. If we start including festival success, then maybe we can start predicting developments on other platforms as well. Sten was saying that the project is ending in March next year, but our activity on building is not finished, will not end at that point. We already have that access to all that data. We have been building up the database. There are quite a lot of issues or problems in there that we're gradually trying to fix. It's hard to interlink the data from these different databases. So we'll be continuing improving this. And at the same time, we will continue acquiring new data as well. Of course, it's relatively easy to acquire new data when it comes to the free data we have access to, but at the same time, some of the data that we're purchasing are not so expensive. So based on the same grounds, we probably can get access to some of that data from our private partners as well. So keep this going. We have probably have funding for keep some of the team also going. So this allows us to keep building. And I mentioned already, I showed you what did we not get. So the aim is to try to get this stuff still. Probably we can do a lot better predictive analytics if we get access to that reception data people are talking about films, for instance. Yeah, and of course, our hardships when it comes to interlinking data, connecting different databases means that we will produce policy recommendations to European Commission and other stakeholders when it comes to data standards they use. I think our message is that it will be quite easy. There is a bunch of standards and identifiers coming this time from across the pond. EIDR, identifier for identifying films, comes from Movie Labs, the NGO set up by the Hollywood studios. This is a very good thing. We will definitely recommend European stakeholders to start using that, as well as the new identifiers. Some of you may already know when it comes to identifiers for filmmakers, and not even filmmakers, but characters and basically avatars of you, whatever kind of are related to you, yeah, because this enables to really do analytics about the dynamics around films, who is relating films and all kinds of production to concrete people and institutions and production companies. And these are open standards, ISO certified, so it completely makes sense for the European institutions to start using these as well. Already I mentioned this. So thank you. And we do have 5 minutes for the questions.
Questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Continuing the little chat that we had outside, Stan, about audiences, right? And how, because a lot of it is, I think you said something like, what, 2,400 or 2,500 films are being made and only, 41 or something like that are actually reaching a certain threshold for profitability or whatever, right? But it's really about audience engagement. So how do you get to audience engagement? For me, it's interesting, until recently I worked at Sony Pictures and we made big Hollywood movies. I was used to at the dinner table, I had, my family members said, why are you making these big Hollywood blockbusters that nobody wants to see? What are the movies for me? I said, well, what do you want to see? Well, I want to see the small dramas, the family dramas or European films. I said, well, would you go and see them in the movie theater? I said, no. Well, that's the problem. Right? So for a market and for an industry, it's driven by the market, by the finances. How do we get, I think part of the issue is audience engagement, whether it's localized and then worldwide as well, especially if you want to go, across the pond to the United States.
So I think everyone should look at Indra's dashboards. If you want to sign up for pilots and get into the dashboards, come talk to us. One of the striking things what Indra showed was the VOD curve. What we basically see is that these kinds of small films, and Indra, correct me, it takes them very, very long time to get onto a platform. Years.
Well, the major platforms, yes.
The major platforms are pretty much the most easiest access point for everyone, because also for a European audience, it's very hard to install a very local, if it's not a broadcaster or a major telco player in the market, it's very hard to install a very specific, curated app or something where the title might be available. Audience might not even know. So I think one of the things we've seen from dashboards, and this is purely my guess, and then my recommendation, is fund less production, but fund more distribution. And be very active in understanding that, there is generally not that problem with the projects that we produce. The quality is great and audiences want to see them, but you need a very hefty P&A and you need a strategic approach to make sure that our titles are on Google ecosystem, Apple ecosystem, the N ecosystem, the D ecosystem, HBO and everything else. This is not what the guilds nor the film financiers are thinking about. This is either by compensating P&A, looking at the data of seeing which platforms are working on certain types of titles, who are commissioning or who are acquiring, and having a very, very blatant strategic approach. Dashboards, you are able to go kind of market by market and really seeing where these gaps are. And we rarely see stakeholders paying attention to that. One of our recommendations that has gone to the Agora as well is really to not address the production problem, but clearly a distribution and visibility problem. And we have that data that broadly shows that. Indrek.
Now I need to talk about our blockchain report and the more recent EU regulations such as data governance, etc., will enable more the emergence of kind of really data management companies that I've been mentioning in terms of is the data even available, what kind of films are there, what is being produced, where they are, etc., enabling sort of much better awareness about films. Right now, if you are a small Estonian films, you do like Arthouse films, you do a festival run and then you kind of are stored on some small platform or some shelves of some distributor, and that's it. So when it comes to making data available that are more detailed about films that are actually produced and systematize this and making films available, this may help in finding the niche audiences, etc., etc. You just first need to increase the awareness and then availability of films wherever they are. They may be on some small platform, but nobody finds them there. So we need to first improve the ability.
I'll jump onto this. There are quite surprising examples. I think the bottom line here is that producers should less worry about the metadata of their film or anything that goes around the visual content. Sharing that and having transparency about that is a win-win situation for everyone. When the budget of a local film institute was discussed a few years back on the government cycle, so we colloquially commissioned the report and turned out to be that Estonian films were quite popular in Australia on VODs and Brazil and not so much in US. And they still have that particular Excel file. I think everyone, including the producers, the distributors, as well as the rights holders in general, will need to get access to that data to look where those uncommon avenues are, then place your bets there and build a strategic approach. We don't have in practice, and this is exactly what we need to build. CresCine has these tools for that.
Well, the internet, there's always been this narrative of the long tail, but the long tail cannot exist when the films aren't available and there's no data about them. So we need to, everybody in small countries especially, need to work on, as Sven was saying, on the metadata, agree on the standards, how we do this. This needs to be facilitated by the film institutes and all these kinds of institutions. And only this, we can really have a significant effect on exporting, especially.
Piret.
You are going to continue collecting this data for about 3-4 years if you get some funds. But after that, what is a long-term perspective? It's very important when you finish doing it, does it disappear somewhere?
On the one hand, our job is to show what can you do, what kind of analytics, if you have access to that kind of data, and then interlink this data to prove that there is value in such things. And once we have proven, yes, we are only universities. Our job is not in the longer term to run these databases and go on building. Our job is research. So the aim would be then, yes, to hand it over as in the existing way, or just in terms of recommendations on how one should do it. Let's say audiovisual observatory, etc. Our job is to do things well right now and then prove our case. I was presenting FIDA and basically almost the same slides a week ago in Helsinki in the European Audiovisual Observatory meeting. And I noticed that when it comes to their future plan, they already started mentioning dashboards as well. And the ideas are converging. This is already an achievement.
Hopefully it will be a non-profit or a commercialized product, but clearly that also depends which stakeholders come on board. So come and talk to us after the presentation. One last thing, we will be wrapping up CresCine in a few months. Our grand finale will be on 14th of February in Berlin at the FM. We will bring in industry discussants, stakeholders, loads of practical recommendations that you can put in place either for your festival, production company guild, or a film institute. We hope to see you on 14th February in Berlin. Thank you very much.
Yeah.